Yeah, the presentation is called How to Bring Down Your Own RTC Platform, and it's about running your own DDoS simulations. And yeah, what I will do is, of course, I only have like 25 minutes, maybe less. So I will just go through a quick walkthrough of how to do DDoS simulations, and I'm going to be very specific to RTC services here. It's definitely not complete. There are certain topics that require a lot of philosophical discussions. I will not go there. Just as a definition, we're going to be talking about DDoS, right? So that's distributed denial of service, distributed attacks that block legitimate usage to your service. And as someone else mentioned, you know, as soon as your system goes down, I think it was you, you know, you're in trouble, right? You're losing money immediately. So that's the big concern here. Why am I talking about this? I'm the author of SIP-Vicious, the open source version. It's a security tool set for SIP. It's been around since a long time now, and I've been in InfoSec since over 20 years, 22 years, and the last 14 years I have been doing offensive security, leading my company Enable Security. And what we do is we focus on RTC security testing. So we do penetration testing and security consultancy in the area of offensive security. And one of the things we do is DDoS simulation for our clients. So you might be asking yourself, you know, why should I bother? Why do such a thing? Well, there's a very good answer for that, and I think Pink and the Brain, you know, would have such an answer. Obviously, it's a lot of fun. You should really do it. Okay, it's intellectually stimulating. You know, you will find things about yourself that you never knew. But seriously, you probably want to find out how your critical services, your voice over IP service, your WebRTC service, any service that needs to be real time, is going to react when attacked. When attacked in a DDoS attack. You have to answer the question, what if we got attacked? The purpose is to create a system, this is your business, that can withstand most DDoS attacks. You can't withstand everything, but you know, a significant amount, a reasonable amount, you should be able to do that. So, and if you have some form of protection mechanism, then, you know, and most organizations have some form of protection mechanism or use technology that is known to be robust. It doesn't have to be, you know, security technology, but it's known to be good. And it's often a hybrid approach. That's when you definitely want to test it out, because security protection mechanisms are often implemented, but rarely properly tested, right? They might be tested, but you know, the engineers say, okay, yes, good, it works. Until you test, you really should not make any assumptions, because from experience, we know that what often happens is that service providers find out that, you know, what they had implemented doesn't really work as well as they had thought during an actual attack, which of course sucks, or it's not ideal. Let's put it that way. So sometimes you have companies that are trying to evaluate different solutions for anti-DDoS solutions. You want to find out, you know, how well does this solution work? Maybe you're comparing more than one. You want to know which one works best for your case, because everyone has a business, and businesses tend to be custom. So, you know, in our experience, most DDoS protection mechanisms do fail at some point. Everything has limitations, right? Maybe it's network traffic bursts. You know, you send a barrage of network traffic, and at first the system just doesn't work, and everything falls over. Maybe it's slow attacks that manage to bypass the security system that you have. Maybe it's the security solution looks for certain patterns, and the attacker can just change their pattern. Every organization has limits, right? So you have, there's no going around that, and this is quite philosophical sometimes, but there's definitely bandwidth, there's definitely system resources that are always going to be limited, and there's going to be application bugs, and application efficiency is going to vary from one software package to another. So there's always going to be problems, but the point is to understand if your current protection level is sufficient against stuff that is real life, okay? Not theoretical. You want to see real attacks on your system before they actually happen. That's why we call it simulation. So, and also, if you're doing threat modeling, this can really help you. Arrive to which are our most critical services, really. How are they exposed to DDoS attacks? What do we need to do to protect against these attacks? This can help you answer these questions as part of the exercise. So, okay, that's why. You might have other reasons, but those are the reasons I come up with usually. Let's discuss what and how. So let's prepare for destruction. So first, you need to decide on what you want to attack, right? And how. Are you gonna do? Is your main concern? Is it bandwidth saturation? Are we talking about generic protocol attacks, or are we talking about specific applications that you're especially concerned about? It might be all of them, of course. Now, for the first two, for the bandwidth or generic protocol attacks, they usually require simple tools. They might be generic tools that you're familiar with, but you're going to be targeting, for example, SIP servers with, register messages with a large number of register messages sent in a short period of time, just as an example, or if it's an API, get messages. But if you're doing specific application functionality, you're attacking specific functionality, then you need to do further homework. You might do some initial tests to find out what should be attacked. You might do some fuzzing, for example, and look for errors and check out the responses. You might look for slow responses. You're going to look at the memory consumption. Is there a slight memory increase? Oh, that might be interesting, because even a slight memory increase in a DDoS attack can lead to huge problems, or exhaustion of any other resources, of course. Now, you're going to need attack tools. For bandwidth saturation and generic protocol attacks, like I mentioned, simple tools are usually enough. The whole point is that the attack tools need to be more efficient than what you're attacking. So if you're attacking a very efficient application, try to do an even more efficient tool to attack that. And normally they just, many attack tools like this, they just generate traffic, okay? They just send a lot of traffic, replaying of messages, SIP messages, if we're talking about SIP. I'm just gonna show you a very quick sample written in Go. Really nothing special, right? There's barely any lines of code there. And it's just, flooding with a specific payload, an options message. We, of course, made it as small as possible here so that it fits, but it's opening a UDP socket and sending over and over again the same message. Maybe you might change some things, but that's it. And then you might also, decide to use Go routines so that you start 100 of those sockets and increase the traffic. What's important, some things that are important when you develop such tools is that you develop rate limiting into your application, or you create some way of limiting your rate, and the ability to do concurrency, which as I showed can be very easy. You also need control tools, right? These are different from the attack tools. These are control tools that control the attack tool. So you need a system to distribute the attack tools, Terraform, for example, or something else like that. And two things, the ability to start the attack and the ability to stop the attack. Now, the ability to start the attack, you can do something like this, right? With SSH, we're just using Linode CLI here, just as an example, and just get a list of IP addresses that you have on Linode, if you're using such a provider, and SSH to them and start the tool that you want to do to attack with. And to stop, same thing, but use the brute force way of kill all, if you like that sort of thing. But when it comes to stopping, there's another tool that is important, which is also about stopping the attack, the kill switch, which I think can be underestimated, but it's really important, because if your attack tool cannot be stopped, it might lead to an incident. So make sure you have a backup plan, and something like this would work. Linode shutdown command, for example. Anyway, so you need attack nodes now. That's the third thing. The other thing that you need, these are the systems from where to launch your attacks. And you have different options. VPS, it's easy to get and relatively cheap. Virtual machines, ideal for internal tests. Bare metal servers, this is our favorite for better resources. When using third parties, though, keep in mind you might cause some inconvenience. So check out their policies. This is kind of the disclaimer here. Especially watch out for bandwidth saturation. I think this is an important thing to keep in mind, especially with VPS providers, that you're not affecting other customers. Which brings me to the next slide, which is about monitoring your bandwidth usage. Even if you're not testing for bandwidth saturation, if you're not doing such attacks, you still need to do this. You still need to monitor your bandwidth usage, because you might think that the application is suffering, but it's actually sometimes the bandwidth that is the problem. So if you're hitting that bandwidth limit or near it, you're going to start causing trouble. And this will lead to incorrect results and a lot of frustration until you figure that out, unless you are, of course, monitoring your bandwidth. We have a blog post about that, of course. It was an interesting blog post. Check it out. I will advertise the blog later. And you want to monitor the bandwidth at two places, at the target and at the attack nodes as well. It helps when debugging stuff. And you want to monitor your application and the system resources. We found that when we're testing applications, it's really good if you have the ability to profile the application on the fly. Don't do profiling unless you need that, but if you can have that on at a later stage while debugging, it's very useful. And don't forget the people. This is, as geeks, we often forget that it's not just the software that we have to deal with. You need to get the engineers involved to monitor the systems. They need to be booked ahead of time. This is it takes time, especially if such tests are happening at 3 a.m. your time. You might not need to advise them much before. And finally, you need a test environment. Now, you need a place to test. That's what I mean by a test environment. you should make sure that it's as close to production as possible, or sometimes it might be production, but of course you need that rate limiter that we talked about before. One more thing, a plan. That's what you need. So you need a plan because you need to figure out what tests you're going to do ahead of time. And you should probably start with the simpler tests before, because you're going to find problems during the testing that if you're doing the complex tests, it's going to be harder to debug and you're going to get stuck. All right, fun time. So you did all the preparations and you want to start. You might need some coffee, but you also need to start monitoring bandwidth, the application, the system resources, and then the dependencies as well. Sometimes you have databases that might be impacted if they are part of the system. So you might need to monitor those things as well. You're going to also use external monitoring. We call it a pinger. What this means is you have something which produces legitimate traffic periodically, every 1 second, and indicates major problems, but it might miss more subtle ones, but it's a very good indication. We have a demo. So we're going to show our tech platform that we use for such tests, but this is similar to probably what you can come up with. We have 3 parts in this demo. So there's the target server, it's a Camelio and asterisk system, it's our demo server. And then there's the monitoring system where we launch the SIP ping, and there's the attack platform client, which controls the attacker nodes. It's just a controller, not the actual nodes. So, video. I don't do live demos, so. Where is it? Where's the play button? Let's see it this way. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna start the pinger. We have monitoring here with htop. Very simple. The pinger is going, and now we're starting the attack platform client, which is gonna run SipVicious Pro on various different machines that we have set up for this demo. All right. Enter, and we're generating a lot of traffic, 4,000 megabits per second and so on. And you're gonna notice the CPU's resources over there spinning up. This is not a high resource machine, but it's good for the demo. And of course we have timeouts pretty much immediately. Just a quick example, of course. So, So next, things will break, of course, and you should get notified through your monitoring system, whatever it is. Maybe different monitoring systems will notify you. You're gonna stop and assess. We're gonna try to do some real work here. This is what, this is not the fun part. This is the challenging part. But you're going to start trying to figure out what the problem is. Some of it might be done now, some of it later, but what's important is that you start looking for the root cause. Some best practices, and I think this slide is pretty important. If you're going to do this, automate as much as possible. Capturing the monitoring results, for example, the bandwidth statistics, you can automate that as soon as for each test you get such logs immediately. Have a real-time communication channel with the engineers. We like to use Google Meet because they are not our customers, and we're sure that it's gonna be working during that time. Work with the engineers, not against them. This is very important. Sometimes we see this approach of different teams working against each other, the security team against the developers or something like that. No, collaborate, don't compete. And this is not a game. You're doing a simulation, and the whole point is to find problems. Not in your opponents, but in your friends' software. Test your tests ahead of time. You're going to have problems in your own tests, so test that. Don't do QA, don't do quality assurance during the actual test. Document each step during when it's done, and the results as well. This can be semi-automated. That's really a great feature. Otherwise, you might forget. You might think that, oh, I will never forget what happened, but we found out that it's very important to keep a log and start doing documentation. And set a fixed scope, okay? Time frame and know your limit. So don't try to do everything. We stick to 2 hours, and by the end of the 2 hours, we're really exhausted. So yeah, know your limits. Next, so what happens next? Well, you know you have problems, so you might accept the risk. But I'm a security professional, so I will not allow you to do that. Really, it really depends on the findings. But generally, do root cause analysis. We started talking about it before. It might have already started, but you might need a dedicated time and effort after such an exercise where you say, okay, we're going to really try to understand what's happening here. Sometimes things are straightforward, sometimes not. And then once you have identified the root cause for each finding, you're going to start talking about solutions and mitigation techniques, and you should probably discuss them. We see a lot of cases where people jump to solutions without a proper assessment, which really undermines the whole effort. So try to figure out a good solution which needs to be practical and make economic sense. It's useless buying a box that costs more than how much the attack might cause you to lose in many cases. The solution should not introduce new problems that prevents legitimate users from using your service. And it should actually address the problem that was identified. Sometimes they address other problems. And it should be implemented, of course, goes without saying. Some examples. So, for example, we saw an outdated library, a logging library that was causing locking. Updating that library would have been an easy solution, although dependency hell meant that it wasn't. Changes in the application configuration. This is great when you have such a problem. You just change the configuration of the application and off you go, hopefully. Rate limiting solutions, they can be really useful in such cases. Application code changes. I mentioned profiling. This might be the result of profiling done during the root cause analysis. One caveat. As business people, we like to think that I'll buy more resources. Most solutions don't rely on that. Buying more resources will only get you so far, in my opinion. Finally, documentation and retest. So update your documentation with details about the solution. Test the solution again. Does it work or does it fail? Okay, it might work, but it might also fail if you change the attack a little bit. Mm-hmm. There's this feedback loop. So you can do more of it. Anyway, so yeah. The whole point is you learn about your system by doing DDoS simulations. You learn things that you really didn't know about your own platform. And you no longer have to guess how you will handle a real attack, right? As a real-time RTC as an RTC provider, I think you have an obligation to keep your platform real-time. It's part of the name. So one more thing, though, security is often a cat and mouse game. So it's not that easy. No security solution is perfect, and that's where incident response and disaster recovery comes in place. Of course, you really want to answer the question of how will we handle the next time that we get DDoSed. So that's my presentation. I would like to thank Alan for inviting me, and my colleague Alfred for the demos and his feedback. A lot of the denial of service stuff is also his work. And our clients, of course, for allowing us to have some fun. Yeah, if you want to get in touch, that's my email address. We have a blog at rtcsec.com, and we have a newsletter that we release every month, which is trying to keep up with what's going on in real-time communications security. Thanks.
Do we have any questions for Sandro?
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. So I would like to ask, what's your opinion on how well the open source projects in the RTC world, like Real, Free Switch, Asterix, and so on, react to the security lacks that we found, and if they are addressed properly?
So the question is, how well do the open source projects like Camellia, OpenShips, and Free Switch you mentioned, react to the bugs that we found?
Yeah.
When we did find specific bugs, we have reported them when we could isolate them. And yeah, they reacted really well. I mean, they fixed the bugs in the software, and they updated they pushed out new versions. So that's one way. Of course, software like Asterisk, Free Switch, and so on, they have natural limitations which are much lower or worse off than software like OpenShips and Camellia, which are more highly performant. So they are often, in fact, used to protect against attacks when you have a PBX server behind them. So how well do they perform? They all have limitations, of course, but if we find specific bugs, we try to report them as long as we can isolate them. Different configurations, though, it's hard to say. Different configurations will lead to different results. So yeah, it's interesting.
We've worked together, so if anyone wants to work with Enable Security, I think very good company to work with.
Thank you.
You know our setup, you helped us improve as well. What we see in the space is that a lot of people are moving behind big carriers like Cloudflare for scrubbing and just bandwidth capacity. It works for us, of course, but what is your opinion on that? Is that the only move a smaller company can do to be protected?
So, do I repeat the question?
Yes, please.
So, Jean is asking about many companies moving towards solutions such as Cloudflare to protect themselves due to limited bandwidth. If that's the only solution, is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, in reality.
I think that's why we have the workshop, because I don't have an answer. So yeah, I would like to discuss this further in the workshop. I don't really have an answer. I think this is quite a philosophical topic, and I do have some slides for the workshop as well about this.
So that's a perfect timing. So let me turn off all the recording devices and